Welcome to the City Council Candidates Forum. Will everyone please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you. The Prior Lake Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring this forum. I'm Dawn Schulberg, and I'm chair of the Prior Lake Chamber of Commerce and also owner of Premier Dance Academy in downtown Prior Lake. The candidates will introduce themselves shortly, and just a friendly reminder to please turn off all cell phones at this time. Thank you for participating in the Candidates Forum. Thank you to our candidates, attendees, city staff, and viewers. We think this is a great way for our businesses and residents to get to know their candidates before they cast their vote on November 8th. We feel this is an asset for the citizens and business owners of Prior Lake to be informed. I have several prepared questions, and the audience may also submit questions on the note cards in the back, and someone will be picking them up during the forum. We will host this event from 7 to 8:30 p.m. We have several rules for tonight. To stay on schedule and to keep everything fair, I will call on every candidate to introduce themselves and tell us why they are running. This part of the forum will be up to 2 minutes in length. After the introductions, I will ask prepared questions, and these questions are limited up to 1 minute. There will be no opportunity for rebuttals until your final comments at the conclusion of the forum. At the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will have a final 3 minutes to summarize their position, offer any rebuttal, and offer why residents should vote for them in November. I have a timekeeper in the front row to keep everyone on time. Please abide by following the time rules. When there are 30 seconds remaining, a yellow card will be held up. When time is up, a red card will be held up, and I will have to stop you. I will now call on each candidate to introduce themselves and tell us why you are running. Candidate Briggs, would you please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running?
Good evening. Before starting, I certainly want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this most important event, as well as for all of you that have taken time out of your days to join us here in the council chambers, and for the many of you following along at home. My name is Kurt Briggs, and my family and I have been members of the Prior Lake community for 17 years. It was about 18 months ago that I first came into this actual council chamber room. And what brought me in at that time was with a neighbor to inquire as to what it was that was driving a double-digit property tax levy. And curiosity, of course, then became an awakening for me, attending subsequent council meetings where, to me, business as usual in the council chambers started to take on a pattern where oftentimes neighbors were speaking out to protect their neighborhoods, their safety, their neighbors from either devastating assessments or road changes or other impediments in their lives. Or it was a conversation around the CIP and the ballooning debt that now, of course, requires upwards of $5 million of tax dollars a year to service. Or it was to discuss cost overruns on projects that have run away, or consultant engagement or budget allocations for projects that lacked community support. And finally, I came to learn that while an agenda may say public hearing, oftentimes it felt like listening was in short supply. So it was through that awakening that I came forward, and I am a candidate for mayor, to offer a change to the business as usual, to provide a change and return the business of the city to the citizens of Prior Lake.
Sorry, Mayor Hedberg, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running.
Good evening. First, I'd like to acknowledge the other folks on the dais here. It's an important step to make yourself available for public service, and not always thankful. I'm Ken Hedberg, and I've served the residents of Prior Lake for 10 years, the past 4 as your mayor. I'm seeking re-election to another 4-year term. My wife and I have lived in Prior Lake for 35 years and raised our family here. We enjoy 5 grandchildren, now with both families living in the Twin Cities. I continue to work as an executive consultant after a long career in top management of several consulting firms. For 10 years, I've focused my attention on making sure Prior Lake remains a wonderful place to live, work, and play for a lifetime. I frequently ask people, why did they move to Prior Lake and why do they stay? The answers have been the same for decades. It's the lakes, parks, support for great schools, a thriving downtown, a small-town feel, and strong neighborhoods. These qualities are vital to our identity, and they're at risk today in this election. Why at risk? My opponent and his colleagues offer pretend government. They pretend that we can turn off growth by simply saying so, even though we're in the midst of a 50-year robust residential real estate market. They pretend that increased traffic, congestion, and traffic safety issues aren't real and don't require action. They pretend that millions in city investments already made in response to the housing market can be ignored and allowed to go to waste. They pretend that we don't need to take care of over $500 million in assets and infrastructure and focus only on today. Finally, they pretend that taxes and spending are out of control when the facts are over 75% of households in 2010 are paying lower city taxes in 2016 or modest increases lower than the rate of inflation. I'm running for re-election to make sure we stay real and renew our commitment to being good stewards of the qualities and resources that make Prior Lake a wonderful place to live, work, and play.
Mayor Hedberg. Candidate Braid, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running.
Thank you, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting us here tonight. My name is Zach Braid, and I'm running for Prior Lake City Council. I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner, and as a business owner, I'm confident I can bring some real value and some common sense to City Hall. I know how to efficiently operate a business, I understand finances, I know how to plan for growth, and I also know how to get a return on an investment. Our family's fallen in love with Prior Lake. My wife Erin, son Dalen, and our Yellow Lab Scout have made it our home. It was a thoughtful and planned decision for me to move my businesses and the nonprofit which my wife Erin founded to Prior Lake. We love our home, our neighbors, our neighborhood, that small town feel and sense of community that is Prior Lake. Now, I first became engaged in our local government through the alarming increase of my personal property tax was 16.5% in 2 years. Then there was an increase in fees, spending, and debt. This is not sustainable. The financial environment does not encourage residents or businesses to choose to move to Prior Lake over other communities like I did. In fact, it does the opposite, and that's a real concern for me. And if elected, I plan on bringing stability to our city's tax levies, spending, and debt. Now, maintaining our high quality of life is very important to me. We should be preserving neighborhoods, homes, and businesses, because if somebody makes an investment in a home in our community or a business, that should be valued and it should be protected. Now, I support sustainable development that preserves and protects our small town feel, and I believe that developers should pay their fair share for the projects that they participate in. Recently, I've spoken to many people and businesses that don't feel that the city's been listening to them. We need to change that. Our city needs to be engaging our residents and businesses, and if elected, I'll do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running.
First, thank you to Sandy, Dawn, and the Chamber for facilitating this evening's forum. And kudos to our community for producing such an impressive slate of candidates. It's an honor to share the dais with you this evening and have the opportunity to represent our community. I would suggest voters focus on the resumes, the basket of experiences of each candidate, proven leadership, and the history of that each candidate has with our community. The electorate is, after all, hiring someone for a job. My name is Kevin Burkhart, and I'm running for Prior Lake City Council. I am thankful my parents, Gary and Lois, established our family in Prior Lake in 1974. Both my wife, Laura, and I are lifelong residents and products of our K-12 public education system. I earned a degree in accounting from St. Cloud State. After a 6-year career as a certified public accountant, I founded a local communications agency called Stepstone Group. My team and I bootstrapped the company into a highly profitable enterprise. We created high-paying and high-benefit jobs in my community. After 20 years, I sold the company and successfully exited at the age of 44. I'm once again engaged in new entrepreneurial activities, but I'm focused on giving back to the community that has given me so much. I'm a philanthropic and entrepreneurial leader in the Twin Cities, and I've served on numerous for-profit and nonprofit boards. Most notably, I've raised $500,000 for Parkinson's disease, my father's affliction, with my world record skydiving efforts. I want to use my broad skill set, my leadership qualities, and my ability to bring people together to help the City of Prior Lake lay the groundwork for an even better tomorrow. I want to serve the next generation today as my forebears did for me. We have a busy, family-based community. I'll call it the silent majority. This puts significant pressure on the shoulders of our elected representatives to do the right thing for the greater good and the long-term future of our city. My objectives include preserve a small-town ambiance, maintain reasonable taxes, and improve the infrastructure for downtown to thrive.
Thank you,
we must
Candidate
listen to
Burkhart.
residents. My name is Kevin Burkhart, and I'm running for Prior Lake City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Keeney, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running.
Hi, I'm Rick Keeney. Currently on the Prior Lake City Council. I was elected in 2009, so I've served for about a little under 7 years. I just give thanks, repeat what everyone said. Thanks for hosting this. Just also want to thanks to the city staff who are here this evening, extra evening of work. Just a little bit about me. My wife, Maria, and I moved to Prior Lake in 2000. I still feel kind of like a newcomer compared to some of these lifelong residents. We built our home here, and we plan to raise our kids here. We found the small town feel of Prior Lake a lot less pretentious and more to our liking than some other lake communities. I got 2 kids. They're going to Twin Oaks Middle School. My day job, I work for Amazon as a software engineering manager. Previously also worked at DataCard and Microsoft. I'm used to handling complex problems, and I routinely make really hard prioritization decisions. But what really I bring from my management experience is understanding that it's the people. It's all about the people in your organization that make things happen. People often ask me why I got into local politics. And like several other people up here today, my home was targeted for some rezoning, would have been detrimental to my neighborhood. And I felt very much in the minority, as many people are when your specific home is a subject of that. And I felt I needed a voice. I wanted my voice to be heard. I also wanted to keep spending at reasonable levels, and we'll talk a lot about that, I'm sure, tonight. Since being elected, I've learned that running local government is a complex thing, and it's not something that you can just learn immediately. And I've invested a lot of time becoming an expert at this. I can't just walk away. When I see all the other volunteers we have in our community contributing what they do to make this place great, I feel compelled to continue to serve, and I ask for your vote. Please elect Rick Keeney.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are running.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, audience, for coming. Thank you, Chamber, for hosting this, fellow candidates. My name is Dave Thompson, and my wife and I moved to Prior Lake 14 years ago to raise our family. We've been blessed to have lived here, and I'm running for City Council because it's important for each of us to step up and get involved at some point in our lives. And to take our experience and our expertise and be willing to give back to our community. I learned a long time ago that if you're going to complain, you better be willing to get in the trenches and fight what you believe in. And believe me, I know everybody here has probably seen me at a meeting over those past 14 years. We have many issues facing our city today, and some trouble me. Prior Lake is a great place to live, and I want to keep it that way. First of all, our spending and debt service continue to grow, and not necessarily for what are the immediate needs of the residents. But in pursuit of growth and development and long-range plans, that becomes self-fulfilling prophecies. I love Prior Lake and our community, and preserving it is important to me. The growth and development that is envisioned and promoted by some can be, I think, detrimental to the values that I hold. Now, protecting our existing neighborhoods and businesses should be our first priority. Transparency in government is very important to me. There's way too much lecturing and not enough listening going on at City Hall, and that needs to be changed. We have an open meeting law in Minnesota, but there seems to be too many business meetings going on and council workshops at inconvenient hours, and those workshops should be recorded and televised.
Thank you, Candidate Thompson. I will now begin with our first prepared question. We will start with Mayor Hedberg. What do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake? And this is a 1-minute question.
As your mayor, I represent all the residents of Prior Lake. My personal preferences are less important than the clear views of residents. Here's what residents like best. Fabulous recreational lakes. They rank in the top 10 in the entire state. Parks that are second to none, with play fields, beaches, neighborhood parks, wonderful community parks, and even a regional park. Support for great schools, a thriving, walkable downtown that's the hub of our city, a quaint small town feel in a growing suburban city, strong neighborhoods where folks get to know their neighbors and watch out for one another. I personally share these views and know these qualities are what makes Prior Lake a wonderful place to live, work, and play for a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, what do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake?
Well, that is tough to sum up in 1 minute, but here goes. I'd start with our natural resources. We're really lucky to have our lakes. We have some of the best natural resources, certainly in the metro and in the state. They help our city to retain and attract great people and businesses, and they promote an active recreational lifestyle that is part of Prior Lake's identity. Then I would say our small town feel and sense of community. That is Prior Lake. It is woven into the culture of our city. We still have a small town feel and sense of community that so many other cities desire. And that's in large part of why I'm running, is to protect that small town feel. And of course, the people. We have great people living in great neighborhoods that truly care about Prior Lake. The people are authentic, they're engaged in what Minnesota Nice is all about. Prior Lakers support each other, they're proud to support their local businesses, and I'm proud to call myself a Prior Laker.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, what do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake?
The first 2 would have to be the recreational opportunities and activities, including the lakes and parks. Prior Lake is one of our most significant assets. It draws people to our community not only to live, but for recreation. I love Charlie's Restaurant on Prior Lake. I'm proud to take people there, and we're very fortunate to have such a nice amenity. I thank the entrepreneurs, Jeff Peschel's group, for their willingness to make the investment and take the risk so our community can continue to have a premier dining experience on the lake. They're a great example of entrepreneurs that need to be nurtured and supported by our community. Our parks are some of the best in the area. As an avid athlete, I use all of our parks, all 4 seasons, and our continued investment in the parks helps define our city. Finally, our neighborhoods and schools. I'm a product of Prior Lake, having grown up right here and attended our K-12 schools. I know them well. We have strong neighborhoods, and Prior Lake does very well at maintaining a small town ambiance.
Thank you. Councilman Keeney, what do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake?
Yeah, well, like many others who are going to say the same things, and I think almost everyone in Prior Lake, they're all going to answer that small town feel. Our lakes, which are like another 2,000 acres of parks, really. We use them year-round, attract a lot of people here. We have fabulous parks and a lot of outdoor recreational opportunities. Strong neighborhoods, great new neighborhoods being built as well. A lot of people forget how many new residents we've added to some of those new neighborhoods. All those things are great, but they're not the best part of Prior Lake. What's best about Prior Lake are the people here, the people who make all these civic organizations, businesses that invest, the youth athletics, the schools, the city, the county, the other municipal organizations. Those are the people that make this place great, and that's the small town feel that I really love about this place.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, what do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake?
So when our second child, Eric, was born 15 years ago, we quickly realized that our small starter home was not going to fit our needs. So my wife, Carrie, and I, as we were researching through the Southwest metro area, we came upon Prior Lake. And like so many people, we value the lake, the open spaces, and the recreational opportunities. Prior Lake is a quiet residential community. We quickly fell in love with it and its small town feel, and the character of its neighborhoods and its businesses and the people. That's why we hold this town precious to us, and I want to see it preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, what do you see as the 3 best things about living in Prior Lake?
This is a question I love to answer. First is the sense of community, and it's something you feel whether you're in the neighborhood, so look out in the audience, look back at home, the neighbors, whether it's there in the neighborhood or in the downtown, you're called by your name in Prior Lake. For the outstanding quality of life, whether it is the unsurpassed natural beauty, certainly we've talked at length about our recreational opportunities of the lake, the parks, our trails, our open spaces. We live in a location also that gives us unfettered access to what a large metropolitan area can bring us. But I will tell you most recently, what I have been thrilled by here in Prior Lake is the unbelievably warm and supportive reception I've been receiving as I'm knocking on doors and as I'm meeting with businesses, introducing myself as a candidate for mayor. Whether on a porch on Green Oaks Trail, a back dining area at Teresa's, or at the Artisan, I've been overwhelmed by the words of encouragement. It's clear to me the citizens of Prior Lake are actively engaged in the election this year and the change that they look forward to making.
Thank you, Candidate Briggs. Question 2, and I will begin with Candidate Braid. What do you see as the role of a council member?
Well, I believe one of the main roles of a council member is to listen to the needs of our residents and businesses, to be the bridge between the taxpayers and the city's management, to ensure that the taxpayers' voice is followed and the decisions are based on the taxpayers' needs, both present and future. There are many in the city that don't feel like that's currently happening at City Hall. We should also be the gatekeeper to our city's finance, to be the check in the system to ensure our tax dollars are spent wisely, and to be good financial stewards, and to manage the tax levies and spending to ensure we don't mortgage our children's future. We should also ensure that there's communication, transparency, and accountability to the public. And if elected, I'd start by televising our City Council workshops so we know what is happening. And I would engage our residents and businesses in the planning phases of projects so that their needs are represented and they aren't relegated to a bunch of bad choices that just don't work for them.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, what do you see as the role of a council member?
The job description for council members includes policy making, appointing the city manager, creating boards and commissions, and managing the city's financial operations. These are no small responsibilities. For the sake of our city, vote for candidates with broad skill sets and true oversight experience. Those that can establish a vision, a sensible budget, exercise fiscal prudence, and promote a healthy work environment for our greatest asset, the employees that show up every day and make this great city even greater. As Theodore Roosevelt said, the best executive is the one who has sense enough to pick good people to do what he or she wants done, and the self-restraint to keep from meddling with them while they do it. For your city council, pick those you think can best establish a vision and let people do their job. Not those that want to question the intelligence of removing snow from cul-de-sacs or constantly questioning the type of streetlight that was chosen. We don't need leaders that micromanage every detail. That's not what leads us to greatness. I know what leads to greatness because I've done it with my own company. It's providing visionary leadership and empowering your employees.
Thank you, Candidate Burkhart. Councilman Keeney, what do you see as the role of a council member?
Well, candidate Burkhart did mention it, and it's high on my list, leadership. Really, as leaders of the organization, that's the City of Prior Lake, and also as part of the fabric of the community, the civic leadership of our community. And leadership is about having a positive attitude and respect for people that gets people to bring their best. Another aspect of the City Council, we make tough decisions. And when it comes down to something where half the community wants you to go one way and half wants to go to the other, you need someone who can make those decisions and have the courage to kind of do a reasonable thing. Listening has been brought up a lot here. I'll talk about that some more, but it's not just at election time. And when you don't get your way, that doesn't mean we didn't listen. It's a lot of times you have to make that decision. So that's the role that we're signing up for.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, what do you see as the role of a council member?
Thank you. Yeah, I believe my role as a council member would be the voice of the people. To me, it's like that of a board of directors, one who would provide oversight, direction, vision, leadership, and be willing to make tough decisions. But that all starts with a council member that is willing to listen. We must never, ever forget that we are working with the taxpayers' money, and that you have entrusted in us the management of those dollars to maintain the quality of life that we have all grown to love here in Prior Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, what do you see as the role of a council member?
As mayor, you are first and foremost a servant to the needs of your community. You're continuously listening and learning. You play a role that is both advocate and ambassador, advocate for the constituents, ambassador for the city. The issues that we're going to face or are facing are incredibly complex, and as such, you need to be fully accountable for the decisions you make. You need to trust and collaborate extensively, and that will occur in an environment with lots of listening and lots of transparency. As mayor, you need to know a lot of stuff. But more importantly, you need a big dose of humility and understanding. People need to know you care before they care what you know. The change I will bring to the role when elected is to focus on conversation, on defining the problems we face. A problem well defined is half solved. As a council, I will seek a unanimous understanding of the problem before embarking on a trail of discussing solutions or spending dollars to solve for an ambiguous issue.
Thank you, Candidate Briggs. Mayor Hedberg, what do you see as the role of a council member?
As servant leaders, councilors need to be good stewards of the qualities and resources that make Prior Lake a wonderful place to live, work, and play for a lifetime. When it comes to decisions, we always aim to meet the needs of homeowners, neighborhoods, and the community overall, both short and long term. Sometimes we face trade-offs, and when doing the right thing for the overall community creates negative impacts for individuals or neighborhoods, it's our obligation to do everything we can to soften the impact while still doing the right thing. For example, on the Maple Mushtown project, we made major revisions to our assessment policies to lower those assessments by nearly 40% and redesigned the roads to slow the traffic. From our history, an outstanding example was installing sanitary sewers around the lake 35 years ago. Quite a few homeowners were negatively impacted, but was clearly the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3, and I will begin with candidate Burkhart. What do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
We must focus on both current and future issues. This is not just about today. The forebears of Prior Lake laid a foundation for me to succeed. I owe it to the next generation to do the same. I believe it's important to align our direction and decisions with the results of resident surveys. The city's most recent survey in 2014 had 31% of residents saying a small town ambiance is what they like most. The second most important item was taxes. Let's discuss each of these. Everyone I speak with draws similar conclusions about the attractiveness of Prior Lake, the laws, the lakes, the parks, the schools, the strong neighborhoods. It feels like home. Let's keep it that way. As they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. We need to keep investing in these assets, the right infrastructure, a long-term road plan for downtown, and a master parks plan. We need to encourage an extension of the regional trail system to ours. With regards to taxes, we must exercise fiscal prudence in our decisions. Council members are custodians of taxpayer resources and should exercise conservative principles with regards to growth in government.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
Well, in no particular order, planning for the growth of the city is something that we have to do. We're still a growing city. Population is going to go from 25,000 to 40,000. We need to make sure that's orderly. We need to make sure the growth funds itself. We need to build the road and utility infrastructures to support that efficiently. And importantly, we need to make sure that we don't sacrifice our existing neighborhoods when we do that. We need to perpetuate and maintain our city assets and infrastructure. We're the stewards of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets that wear out, need to be replaced. I'm proud to say we have put some long-term plans in place to make sure we can sustain that on an ongoing basis. And the priority that I really think we need some work on improving community and family safety. The surveys we get show traffic, speeding, distracted driving, DWIs, drugs in our youth. Those are things that people are worried about. I think we might need to make a little bit more investment into our community safety.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
Well, I believe the top 3 priorities are protecting our neighborhoods, managing growth, and keeping long-term spending under control. As for our neighborhoods, they are the backbone of our community. They ought to be protected, respected, and preserved. Too often, City Hall's vision threatens the well-being of our neighborhoods with too little concern for the neighbors. Growth. Preservation of our small town feel is essential. Growth must not be allowed to destroy our small town environment or burden our taxpayers with undue costs. And as regards to spending keeps increasing with no end in sight. We currently have close to some $40 million in debt and over $5 million in debt service each year. And this is too much. We need to be able to manage that in a way that can be sustainable without being an undue harm to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
Top of the list, bring accountability and transparency to what we do. Too many of our citizens are surprised by decisions that come upon them. And I think we can start by first pulling as much of what takes place across the hall here in the workshop settings into the light of the cameras that we all enjoy here this evening. When elected mayor, I will be implementing quarterly town hall meetings. We'll be short on presentation, long on candid conversation, long on discourse that precedes the decisions we as a council will be expected to make. We do need to bring a common sense approach to growth. What is common sense? Growth needs to pay for itself. It simply is not enough to expect that we can bring growth and then ask the taxpayers to subsidize it. Finally, we do need to spend like there is a tomorrow. As mayor, I would seek to find a pair of scissors around here and cut up the city's credit card to bring into check that spend that is driving our debt. Those are taxpayers' dollars not going to critical services. By cutting the card, we'll focus on sustainability.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
It starts with our downtown. We don't have a road network that works for the next generation, and no answer on this question has led to no new buildings downtown since 2007. Further, without new development, we have no mechanism to pay for needed additional parking. Second, we need to update the Master Parks Plan, last updated in 2008. Parks are top among the resources residents value, and we need a clear set of policies and plans to help us prioritize future needs, such as the Spring Lake playfields or a trail down Highway 13 and many more. Third, we need to restore and re-strengthen our relationship with the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community. Their enterprises are a vitally important economic engine for Scott County, providing nearly 700 jobs for Prior Lake residents. The SMSC provides cash funding of nearly 5% of our general fund. And we have mutual agreements on water supply that has eliminated redundant infrastructure. We can't let that relationship continue to erode.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, what do you believe should be the top 3 priorities for the city and why?
First, I would start with fiscal responsibility. We need to stabilize our tax environment, curb spending, and get our financial house in order. We need to do this so our residents and businesses can thrive. Stabilizing our finances will also help us to create an environment to attract good residents and businesses to Prior Lake over other communities. Second would be preserving neighborhoods, homes, businesses, and our high quality of life that we have here in Prior Lake. That means maintaining our infrastructure that is necessary to keep Prior Lake and while still respecting our neighborhoods, homes, and businesses that have made an investment here. We also need to be sure that our lakes are protected and kept clean so that people will want to continue to live here. Third would be increased communication. We need to be listening to our residents and businesses to ensure we're only moving forward with projects that actually have the community support and the community's agenda in mind.
Thank you. That ends the 3 prepared questions. I now will read additional questions from the audience and the public that were submitted. Were there any additional? I have quite a few, and I will end approximately 8:15. And I'm starting with Councillor Keeney. What type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with the SMSC and why?
The relationship with the SMSC, kind of at a top-level view, it's like another municipality. It's like a sister city in some sense. But there are certain legal status that's a lot different than any other city in Minnesota. It falls under federal jurisdiction, and they enjoy some various types of rights and advantages under those laws. But what really I think we need to do with our relationship with the SMSC is to call on those leaders of the SMSC tribe to consider that they are becoming part of the leadership fabric of our community, part of the leadership of our county, and they need to do the right things for this community because they live here too. There's some examples of some things they're doing. They're recently committed to up some contributions to a drug task force. I'd like to see them contribute more to our school system.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, what type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with the SMSC and why?
Thank you. So I have great respect for our neighbors at the SMSC. I've looked at how they've built their empire and see that it's that of what somebody would do with the American dream, and I have great respect for that. I do have some concerns, though, when lands are taken off the tax rolls and put into trust, because that can be somewhat detrimental to the taxpayers of Prior Lake. While I feel that we need to maintain a great working relationship, I do have concerns with that issue, and would hope that while we can work on many mutual aspects of our relationships between the two communities, that we would agree to disagree in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, what type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with the SMSC and why?
I think the relationship with the SMSC is vitally important to Prior Lake, and I applaud staff and the council for establishing a collaborative agreement around our recent water well, and that brought significant benefit to Prior Lake taxpayers. That said, the word that we will hear up here is right now, a contribution is not a tax. And I likewise am concerned that as the long-term economic security of Prior Lake can be weakened as additional acreage goes into trust, which leaves for us investment in infrastructure that will require maintenance left behind for the remaining taxpayers.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, what type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with SMSC and why?
As Councilor Keeney mentioned, they follow the rules as set forth by them by the federal government, and they have authorities that aren't the same as the cities. We need a relationship that has open listening that goes both ways, that's built on establishing partnerships and understanding one another's interests and cultures. We need to listen carefully and have open ears with them. Our biggest risk is not taxes. You know, if we don't develop an area, we don't have to increase the cost to service that area. The biggest risk is our infrastructure. And what we've done, and by the way, through open listening, we've established a joint water supply agreement, as candidate Briggs mentioned. And we also have agreement on both sides that we should pursue construction of a joint water treatment facility, so that would literally save $9 million of capital. And none of that capital would be spent by the city. So infrastructure is our biggest risk, and working together, we can minimize the impact of the duplicate infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, what type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with SMSC and why?
Well, the SMSC is our neighbor, and like any neighbor, we have to work together to come up with solutions that both sides can prosper with. I'm not convinced fee to trust represents Prior Lake's interest. It feels a little bit more like lost opportunity, so I'm wary of it. But with the right leadership, I'm confident we can come up with something that will allow both sides to prosper with.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, what type of relationship do you believe the city should maintain with SMSC and why?
I want to pursue an improved relationship with the SMSC for the benefit of all parties. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise right next door, and our relationship should be less tenuous. The SMSC needs to be recognized as a thriving member of our community. As I understand it, currently they give us aid each year of about $500,000, and we purchase about $500,000 of water from them. And the aid that they give us is not guaranteed. That can change from year to year. And ideally, I'd like to see a long-term mutually beneficial joint or some sort of an alliance agreement with the SMSC, so we're not going back and forth each year about those numbers.
Thank you. I will begin with candidate Thompson. Do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
I am not opposed to increasing the levy if there's a need for what we need today. If we have issues where we're trying to build something today for 40 years from now, I would have an issue for bonding for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
Let me take that in two tacks. The first, I'll take on the latter first. In regards to increasing property tax for maintaining services. I think the need to raise taxes for maintaining services should be a wake-up call that says that our underlying financial security is at risk, and we need to look at what could be driving those maintenance costs that we cannot satisfy with our existing tax base and tax levels. To the point of bonding for future long-range plans, certainly as I would invest in a home, pulling a mortgage or long-term bonding is the most viable option for pursuing long-term capital improvement.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
I'm going to take them in reverse order as candidate Briggs did. On additional tax levies, we debate these things pretty hard every year. And the city staff manages to come up with responses that are within reason pretty much. For example, this year's operating budget is increased about 1.3%. So I think we'll have those continued debates, and maintaining and restoring services is a critical agenda every year. On long-range bonding for long-range projects, you got to understand we have over $500 million in assets, and yet we have $40 million in debt. If you had $500 million, if you had a $500,000 house, you'd probably have $300,000. Or we don't have $300 million in debt; we have $40 million, and we don't borrow anything to maintain our utility infrastructure. So it is wise to use long-range bonds to support long-term assets, such as roads.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
Well, I'm going to start with the taxes first as well. I'm not really in favor of raising the tax levy. I think we need to be looking at our expenses first before we're going to enter into a conversation of raising taxes. When it comes to the bonding, while it may be necessary, it should be measured to make sure that we aren't mortgaging our children's future in order to fulfill long-range plans.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
I'm uncomfortable with an increase in the tax levy. I would hope that the most recent double-digit increase is a reasonable catch-up over where we were pre-recession. And then as far as bonding goes, if those are, if bonding makes an appropriate investment in long-term assets for the community, such as a water treatment facility, and it ends up saving us dollars in the long run, then that would be something I would consider.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, do you support additional bonding for long-range projects and equipment purchases? Do you support immediate increases in property taxes or other fees to meet the increasing costs of providing basic services to the residents of Prior Lake?
So I think it's a little bit naive to say a zero increase in the levy is the right answer to maintain our current services. Our city is growing by somewhere between 1.5% to 2% a year just in population. Plus we have inflation to deal with and rising costs of employee costs and such. So we need almost 3% increase in the levy just to stand still. That's to provide the same services. So in that sense, I think we're about right now, and I would support going at that pace. Bonding as a funding mechanism is the right way to fund large capital projects. I've gone on record and have voted recently to reduce some of the capital projects out of our immediate CIP. I think we have done a lot of big things lately, especially some big road projects. Some of them went a little bit over budget, and I think we need to slow down a little bit for a while.
Thank you. Our next question begins with candidate Briggs. The Highway 13 had a $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
Quite honestly, I don't know why the overrun. I do know that there has been a pattern where we initiate projects and we are surprised by how the project morphs, or the land or the dirt in that area is not stable from an engineering perspective, so that it does require additional resources. So I can't provide a solution to what would prevent that in the future, aside from all the due diligence we can do up front and an understanding as to the scope of the problem, so that when we get into it, we have the solution that meets the problem we're hoping to address.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg. The Highway 13 had a $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
Well, I would certainly hope so. There are circumstances on that particular project that have made it very difficult. And they include soils, and they include some engineering issues on the reconstruction of 150th. And in particular, we've faced significant increases in right-of-way acquisition costs, much beyond what were estimated early on. I want to note here that most projects for the city come in below engineers' estimates. A great example is the Markley Lake Trails. It came in $100,000 below the engineering estimates. Or the project just wrapping up right now, Manitou Road. That's coming in below engineering estimates, and we're saving the residents $1,000 per household in assessment costs. So our track record is very good. I think 13 and 150th is one that should teach us a lot of lessons to improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Braid. The Highway 13 had a $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
Well, I don't know why it went over budget, but we need to understand why. I guess the question that I have is, why wasn't the homework done before the project started? Because that seems to be the key. We need to understand it so it doesn't happen again, and we need accountability for these projects that go over budget. We can't just continue to go over budget, roll it into debt, move on to the next project, and roll it in, and it just continues and continues and continues, and that has to stop.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhardt. The Highway 13 had a $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
As I understand it, we went with the low bidder for the project. After the vendor got started and was working on the project, they felt that there were a lot of items that were not in the scope of the project, and they came back to the city with a request for more money. So it sounded like it was a front-end planning challenges, probably on both sides, I would imagine. And I'd like to use the remainder of my time to respond to Councilor Keeney's thoughts on the taxes. In response to the city's most recent survey in 2014, taxes are of top concern. I think we've got to respect that and exercise fiscal prudence in our decisions and do whatever we can to maintain a static tax levy.
Thank you. Councilor Keeney. The Highway 13 had a $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
Well, I'll just come back and say, I mean, it depends on your definition of overrun. But yes, I do understand why it was $1 million more than originally estimated years before any engineer started looking at the soil, the topology, and then before we negotiated with Savage as to who would do the property acquisitions, and before we had the actual project designed. And to make better estimates costs money. You have to do the engineering before you know how much something's really going to cost to build. Typically, we get flack for that. If we do too much consulting and engineering time, people say, stop doing that. What if you don't do the project? So you kind of have to decide to do the project and go ahead. It was never out of control. This council deliberately made those decisions when we were given the information to proceed with the project. It was extremely important. It was one of our most fatal intersections in Prior Lake. We had to do it. I would do it again.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson. The Highway 13 had $1 million overrun stated last year. Do you know exactly why? I understand it now also has an additional overrun. Would you be able to control this type of thing?
Well, not sitting on the council and being able to make those decisions, I guess I can't tell you the specifics. As reading about it over the year or so that in the planning, I heard there was something in the soil or with bore samples that they didn't anticipate how deep they were going to have to go with the footings for the bridging. But I'm not the expert on that. That put them over. The city's decision to move it to 1/50th versus Savage's recommendation on Zinran was an additional burden to the city of Prior Lake. City of Prior Lake bore the additional cost for their preference to have it moved up to 1/50th. So with the overrun of the cost to move it to 1/50th, the poor planning and what I'll call bore samples or not anticipating how far they needed to put footings in and whatever other project delays or costs have come, it seemed, time's up, sorry.
Thank you. Next question begins with Mayor Hedberg. Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
Well, absolutely. These are, for 40 or 50 years, our wonderful parks have been listed as among the top resources that people value, along with the lakes and open spaces. We have a more active resident population than ever before, and we need to keep it up. And there are new things we need to do in the future. And so one of my priorities is to make sure that we update our master parks plan. We have looked at how we can reconfigure neighborhood parks as the demographics of those neighborhoods change over time, potentially saving money and reconfiguring how we work those. But our park system is essential to our identity, and I'm committed to maintaining it and enhancing it.
Thank you. Candidate Braid. Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
Yes, Prior Lake has some great recreational resources, and that does include our vast park system. With over 55+ parks, we do need to maintain our parks and current trail system. They promote an active recreational lifestyle that's important to most Prior Lakers, but we also need to do that within reason.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart. Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
Yes, of course, as I stated in my opening comments, the parks and our lakes, our recreational opportunities in our city are really the golden goose for our community, and something that we want to continue to maintain and take care of and grow and create access for people that are joining our community as we move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney. Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
Parks are great. They're wonderful. I mean, they're on the top list of everyone why they love living here in Prior Lake. They're also expensive. They're an expensive luxury. So it takes some careful consideration of exactly how much of that we can afford. And that's where some of these tough decisions come in. And so I would challenge people to make sure they don't speak out of two sides of their mouth on this issue and say they love the parks and somehow they're not going to spend any money on them, because land costs, facilities cost, developing the parks, and then you got to maintain them. You put in your 55 neighborhood parks, and 30 years later you got to put new swing sets and that's going to cost out of the tax levy to do that. So they're luxurious and they're really nice. Most people think they're worth it. Yeah, about where we are is about the right level.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
Yes, absolutely. We do value our parks and our lake and our recreational facilities. It's absolutely important for us to make sure that we maintain a certain level of care for those parks. But like Councilmember Keeney said, with what cost? We do have to prioritize and fiscally plan for making sure that we can maintain those parks at the levels that they're at. And so there will be probably necessities to make sure that maybe some don't get the same level of attention that others do. Maybe they don't cut as often, but definitely a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, Prior Lake has historically valued its community and neighborhood parks. Should this position continue, and why?
The parks are incredibly important to the citizens of Prior Lake. That said, I think we do need to take a long, hard, solid look at how the parks are being utilized. I think we have an opportunity. Last year, we had a truck that used to flood neighborhood rinks that was taken out of service. I'd be curious how many of those parks where we did have rinks previously complained that the rinks were not in place last winter. So as we look at our parks, they are an asset. They are what bring people to Prior Lake, but they are very expensive. I agree actually with something I heard at a council meeting from Mr. Hedberg about 3 months ago, a new development. In exchange for putting a park in, we could extend a trail. So finding ways to link our parks, creating potentially a greater asset while still lowering the costs of maintaining our parks, I think would be a noble thing for us to embark upon.
Thank you. Our next question begins with candidate Braid. A big complaint is currently that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
Well, I would start by televising city council workshops so that we may know what's happening within our city. I would also utilize some social media platforms, perhaps things like Nextdoor, to communicate with neighborhoods that are having meetings or projects in their area to get their input. And then I would definitely get the residents and businesses involved in the planning stages of projects so that they can help find solutions to the issues and to the projects before they're relegated to choice of bad options.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart. A big complaint currently is that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
I have a few ideas on that. To increase resident participation, I think that it would be wise for the council and related commissions to step outside of City Hall and meet residents on their own turf. Meetings should be held from time to time at venues other than city offices. Another opportunity is the online open town hall interactive forum concept that we could utilize for broader input on key issues. Council members should also be required to engage in outreach efforts through local media or civic organizations to further community involvement.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, a big complaint currently is that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
So this resident involvement issue is one that is a tough problem. And it's really the reason why we have elected representative government. Not every resident can be an expert on everything that we do. It's just too much information, it's too much time. You have to elect people and trust them to lead and do the right things. We go out of our way to try to get resident participation in things. We mail them things. We have social media. We have formal public hearings that are required by law before we can do certain things. People don't show up. We had we passed the preliminary budget levy last night. There was no one here. I got 0 emails. There might have been, maybe there was someone here, but like 2 people maybe. I got 0 emails, 0 calls, 0 input on that issue from anybody in this town. Public participation is a hard thing to make happen.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we'll have to hold that question. Candidate Thompson, a big complaint currently is that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
That's a tough one. Like I sit on several boards and committees in other communities as well. And when we are making proposals in our communities, we do all of the same outreach. We post it in the paper. We send it out social media. We email. Short of actually calling everybody that it's affected or knocking on their doors and bringing them to the meeting, the only way people seem to want to get involved is when their taxes are going up and they didn't know about it, but it's been planned for 2 years in advance. I don't have an answer for that, but I would certainly look at any options that we could do to engage the public in getting more involved in city politics. Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor Hedberg. Oh, I'm sorry, Candidate Briggs. My apologies. A big complaint currently is that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
Really, there's 2 things that I would bring to bear. One is I am a strong advocate of quarterly town hall meetings. I think there can be a cadence to those agendas, meaning that there are certain times through the year that the council is faced with decisions. And when it comes to taxes, when it comes to capital improvement, when it comes to all sorts of issues that do tend to fill the council chambers, I say we allow the town hall to be an opportunity for short presentations, long discussion. I'll also say I've been amazed as a candidate for mayor, the power of social media, and how quickly you can get the attention of many through touches, reaches, pokes, and all sorts of means for getting interest in an endeavor. And I would strongly encourage us to look at ways to reach that voter that is a voter and constituent that isn't able to come into our council chamber through some electronic means.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg. A big complaint currently is that there is not a lot of communication to the taxpayers. How would you change this?
Well, I can tell you we have a very involved and engaged community overall, whether it's community organizations or volunteers for the city or groups that make their voice heard here. And our surveys indicate that. We have very involved, and so the bar is set pretty high. In my time on the council, every time we've been asked to make things more transparent, we've acted to do so. We've delayed announcing our public hearing for the budgets so that we encourage more people to come to the public forums. We've changed the format of the public forum. There's any number of things. I'm open to any idea that we might have. I've heard several good ones right here. Quarterly town halls, televising the work sessions. We've considered that in the past, and there's technical barriers and so on. So I'm open to doing as much as we can. I think we work pretty hard to try to get the message out, and as several people have noted, it's not necessarily an easy task.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart. People like Prior Lake's small-town values. What small-town values would you preserve?
When I speak with people, they talk about Prior Lake feeling like they're coming home. People that have left our community and have returned talk about it as being a place that they just love to return to. And I think part of that has to do with our Main Street, and the turnaround that's occurred there over the last 10, 15, 20 years has been very impressive, and we need to continue that. Our public beaches are a significant asset. It creates access to the lakes. One of the things I'd like to see is a return of the lifeguards to the beaches. That's part of a small town ambiance. Certainly all of our parks and our recreational facilities are a significant part of that.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, people like Prior Lake's small town values. What small town values would you preserve?
Well, I think I did speak about this already a little bit in terms of it's the people and that community involvement. I want to do as much as I can to preserve that. I love the fact that we score very highly in surveys as terms of community involvement in all our civic, municipal, everything. Another small town value that I really take to heart is kind of that modest, non-pretentiousness, and a little bit of the rural character of Prior Lake. We're on the edge of the rural area. We're on the edge of the urban area. We kind of get the best of both, which I think is kind of a small town feel. I've said this before. I drive past Highway 13 and 21 and I see the snowmobile cleat marks on the curb, and I'm proud of that. I like that. I like we still have snowmobiles in town.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, people like Prior Lake's small town values. What small town values would you preserve?
Again, if you look at the surveys that they have, I think one of the top scoring surveys that you'll see is the small town feel that Prior Lake has. And I really feel it goes back to our neighborhoods and our downtown. They are the backbone of our community, and they need to be protected, respected, and preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, people like Prior Lake's small town values. What small town values would you preserve?
Well, the small town values, I will say, are not for me to preserve. They're held and they're by the individual neighborhoods. They're held by us. There are certain things that we can hang on to and preserve in hopes that they will continue to reinforce the values. But in going from neighborhood to neighborhood during the National Night Out, it was interesting to see that the small town feel varied neighborhood by neighborhood, and each in their own way quaint, but each uniform in accepting of others coming in. So the value is something that's held by the neighbors. What I see that I so enjoy is in this town, it does seem like everybody does know your name. You are not just simply someone passing through, and that is certainly what keeps us here.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, please, people like Prior Lake's small town values. What small town values would you preserve?
Well, I don't think we should let any of the values of small town feel erode. What makes up small town feel? I think strong neighborhoods and people in them, and several of the members on this dais have mentioned that. It's very important. People do feel like they're coming home, and that encourages active involvement. Our downtown is a very important that's a hub of the city, is a very important part of the small town feel. And interestingly, having the buildings of city government located here is very much like an outlying city. You don't see it much in suburbs. Finally, open spaces. You know, that gives us the feel of being next to or a part of the rural America, not just a suburb. And we've got more open space than almost anybody. Between 40 and 50% of the entire acreage of this city is open space, excluding privately held land. And that'll be there forever. It's the lakes, it's the parks, it's the open spaces. So that's it. Neighborhoods, people, downtown, open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Braid, people like Prior Lake's small town values. What small town values would you preserve?
Well, Prior Lake has a great sense of community, and Prior Lakers definitely support each other. We have a vibrant Main Street now. We have a great farmers market that we enjoy on Saturdays. And we have a recreational lake community that keeps people active and involved and in speaking and working with each other and chatting with each other. And we also do need to be preserving and protecting our neighborhoods and not disrupting them, because that is where people live, that's where they bond, and that's where they grow as a family together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
The proposed preliminary levy that we passed last night represents, like I've explained before, almost 2% of that is just growth of the city. Another percent or so of that is inflation. Just to stand still, we're in for 3.5%. That, as Mayor Hedberg explained, we've actually reduced the operating budget of the city this coming year. So I'm in favor of that portion of it, although I think it's time to start being a little cautious that we might be pushing things a little bit in that area. Those decisions were already made. We spent the money in our capital plan, and we have to pay the bill. Those decisions come when we make the CIP.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
No. I'm not. I've said that I'm not unopposed to raising the levy for the needs, but when I look at a policy that the board just passed to shift costs to homeowners for mill and overlay that's going to raise $300,000 next year, that's, what did I hear, $100,000 is a 1% increase in the levy. So really it's not 5.9%, it's 8.9%, because they didn't lower the levy, that $300,000 that they're assessing people, they've increased it. So I would figure out a way of cutting that number down, because it's really higher than what they've listed here. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
No. And I've been through two cycles, two budget cycles, and quite honestly, I've taken on some of the skepticism, cynicism that I've run into from citizens relative to the underpinnings on the proposed change. And what I've seen past two budget cycles is about a 20% reduction of that number when pressed for it. So if I was to handicap, again, if I was silent, and I won't be silent, my guess is that number will come down to on the order of 4.8% by the time we're all said and done with it. Am I happy with that number? I'm going to say no, I'm not really happy with that number either, but I believe that's where it's probably going to net out after some contentious discussions.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
Well, last evening we passed a preliminary levy and preliminary budget of 5.1%, not 5.9. This year we're having about a 3% increase in households, and we decided several years ago that levy per household was the right metric. So if we take that into consideration, our levy per household will grow next year by less than 2%. So it's barely over inflation. So I do support it. I would say that Councillor Keeney indicated that we've cut operating expenses down to 1-point-some% increase, which is not even covering all the inflation in our labor contracts and so on. What is increasing still is our capital funding and our debt service. And like Mr. Keeney indicated, I'm proud of the fact that we have long-range plans that cover the vast range of our assets that we have, and we've got to take care of those assets. That's what we're catching up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
In short, no. We've had a lot of increases. We've had increases the past few years, increases in taxes, fees, assessments, debt, you name it. It really comes down to either raising revenue or cutting expenses. And I'd start, I guess, with a zero-based accounting method that we use in our businesses that puts every expenditure on the table, not just the yearly increases. And I think that would help to keep our tax levy down continually so we're not going back to the taxpayer year after year and asking for more money.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, are you in favor of the proposed property rate increase at 5.9% for next year?
So the short answer is no. And this engine of government is complex and challenging to manage. And I struggle to understand how, as farmland turns to more highly taxed residential developments, it should follow that there should be more reasonable tax rate, tax levy increases as we go along, because we have a significant amount of additional revenue coming in as a result of those properties. And I understand a portion of that has got to go to service the infrastructure of those neighborhoods. But it seems to me, I don't want to argue with the product of government. What I want to analyze is the cost, the price of that product. And to go up 10% and then another 5.1% after that.
Thank you.
And if you read the paper at all, inflation has been about 1.75% for decades per year, not 3.5%.
Thank you.
It seems unreasonable.
That's the last question we're able to ask. You now have 3 minutes to summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th. We will begin with candidate Thompson.
Thank you for having me here tonight. Like you, I have concerns about the direction of our city. That's why it's important for us to step up and get involved. We must take an active role in holding our officials accountable for our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are the backbone of our community, as I said before. They ought to be protected and respected and preserved. Too often, City Hall's visions threaten the well-being of our neighborhoods with too little concern for our residents. Our neighborhoods should be the first priority, not a 2040 vision. Growth. Growth will happen, but it should be sustainable and conservatively managed. Growth must not be allowed to destroy our small-town environment or burden taxpayers with the cost. City Hall needs to be in sync with our residents and our businesses. As for spending, spending keeps increasing. As I said earlier, our council just passed a shifting mechanism that now puts the burden for mill and overlay onto the taxpayer, where it was borne by all the residents. Now this means, and I'm not opposed to that, if the budget would go down an equal amount, but it's not. The budget's gone up, so it's a hidden tax. So this is a deliberate move to tax us more and make it look like the yearly levies are staying low. To me, that's not right. That's why this year's election is a referendum on change. Working together with your support, we can make that change happen. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Dave Thompson, and I would appreciate your support this November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briggs, please summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th.
I'd be happy to. First, let me say thank you so much to the Chamber, to Dawn for a wonderful evening. My background does not include a lot of politics. As a matter of fact, the last elected office I held was senior class vice president. But I do applaud candidate Burkhart's recommendation. You look at the experience in the resumes relative to leadership. And in that regard, I think you're going to find that my professional life experiences are very deep. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you're going to get with Kurt Briggs is what you see is what you get. There are no preconceived agendas. There's no beholding to the past. There's no mandates to be fulfilled. All through the learning and listening that's going to come through town halls and listening to you is what will be guiding my every move. You know, in that regard, I'm comforted by the words of Mark Twain. And it was Mark Twain that said to us, it's not what you don't know that's going to hurt you. It's what you know for sure that ain't so that's going to come back to bite you. So with your vote, I'm going to bring about 3 changes, and I'd like your support on. Number 1 is that accountability and transparency and communication. We will either overcome technological challenges that prevent workshops from being made visible to our residents, either by bringing them in here or pulling cameras in there, to create a city government that serves the people. The second, we are going to apply common sense to our growth. The reality, of course, is I've done more and more reading on growth. When we take an acre of ag land and we develop it, the challenge, of course, is the services it brings along. And in infrastructure and demand, it is very difficult to keep up with that tiger, even if you have it by the tail. So we need to look at growth in terms of sustainable growth that carries its own load. Finally, we do need to spend like there is a tomorrow, not like it's not going to come. And in so doing, I'm going to be doing everything I can to look at those spends to ensure that the dollars that come from you are cared for, or as we've heard earlier this evening, a good steward of those resources. So remember, you've got a choice in November for mayor. And I want to encourage you to look at that choice as business as usual or a change. And when you view that and you look for change, I'm going to ask that you vote for Kurt Briggs. I invite you to start that change today by visiting us on the Choose Briggs Facebook page or the Choose Briggs website, because certainly we are open for the feedback and look forward to engaging you, be it through social media or on your porch, coming to you shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Hedberg, please summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th.
A reminder, 75% of 2010 households are paying lower city taxes in 2016, or only modest increases lower than the rate of inflation. That's the facts from the County Assessor's Office. We hear that debt is ballooning, but it's just not true. Our reported debt did jump by over $5 million at year-end 2015 because we voted unanimously to refinance, saving $500,000 in interest over the remaining life of the bonds. We're required to report both the old bonds and the new bonds until we retire the old ones. Within months, the debt will drop back down by $5.4 million. We also voted unanimously in a decision that we all described as a no-brainer to support the Guaranteed Energy Savings Program. Under it, we're guaranteed to save hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in energy costs. We took on $2.6 million in debt to support that program. That's $8 million in debt, 5.4 of which is going away. And those were done to save money for the taxpayers right now. We hear that new development raises taxes. In fact, all new infrastructure needed for development is paid for by developers through building permits and other fees and through acreage charges to support streets, sewer and water systems and parks. For example, the funds to pay for the sewer and water mains under the new County Road 81 comes entirely from trunk funds contributed by developers in the past. Further, development fees cover all the costs, staff and engineering consultants to regulate and support development, nothing from property taxes. The greatest irony, for at least the past 15 to 25 years, development has diversified the tax base and reduced city taxes for existing homeowners. How? The vast majority of residential development has been at prices well above the average in the city. What that means is that thousands of new homes have paid a larger share of taxes than existing homes, reducing the amount that we have to collect from the base. The election on November 8th is indeed nothing less than a referendum on the future of the city. If you love living here and want Prior Lake to remain a wonderful place to live, work, and play for a lifetime, if you value parks, lakes, support for schools, a thriving downtown, small town feel, and strong neighborhoods if you want more businesses in town so you can spend more of your dollars and get more of your services locally, if you believe, as I do, that we've been on the right track for many years, then you need to vote for Ken Hedberg for re-election as mayor. I'm dedicated to good stewardship of the qualities and resources that make Prior Lake a wonderful place to live, work, and play for a lifetime. The alternative is pretend government that may offer short-term benefits, but will assuredly irreparably harm the city in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Braid, please summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th.
If you believe, like I do, that Prior Lake's future can even be brighter than our past, but in order to do so that we need some change, that we need a city hall that listens to its residents and businesses so that we can work together to find solutions to tough problems. If you believe the same, then I am your candidate. We've heard a lot here tonight. We've listened to the incumbents, many of you who that haven't found a fee or a tax they didn't like, and now they're attempting to pass themselves off as a fiscal conservative because it's an election year. They attempt to minimize and justify our cost of living increases and spending. And we all know that the incumbents didn't run on that form of high taxes and more spending in the last election, but that's what's happened. And we also know that past management is the indicator to how they will manage it in the future, no matter what is said here tonight. The fact is we have had dramatic tax increases, and we have had dramatic cost of living increases. We've had taxes, fees, new road assessments for overlays that were once included in our property taxes, and millions of dollars of increased debt. Our city's financial environment is not sustainable. It does not encourage residents and businesses to invest in Prior Lake. And that's a real concern for Prior Lake. And if elected, I plan to bring stability, predictability to our city's tax levies, spending, and debt. There also needs to be more accountability in our government. There has to be some accountability to the taxpayer for these spending overages on projects, or they'll just continue. Because rolling them up and just increasing the debt and moving on to the next project doesn't cut it. It doesn't work that way in managing a family's finance. It doesn't work that way in business, and it should not work that way in local government. Now, I support road and traffic improvements, but there are more to these improvements than just a traffic engineer's perspective or an expensive consultant's opinion that has no vested interest in our community. We need to be preserving our neighborhoods, homes, businesses, and our Main Street, because I can't think of anything more American than Main Street and neighborhoods. Whether it's across the United States or right here in Prior Lake, it is part of the fabric of what makes this country great, and we need to support it and we need to protect it. Now, I'm running for City Council because I care about Prior Lake, and I care about the direction we've been headed. I've never run for public office before, and I'm not running because I have leftover signs from a previous election. I'm running because I believe in this city, and I believe in the people and the businesses of this city, and I believe that we still can make a difference in government, and I believe that we should feel like our voices are heard, that government should be working for the people and not the other way around. Prior Lake's a great community. It could even be made better. My name is Zach Braid, and I'm ready and willing to serve you. So I ask for your vote this November.
Thank you. Candidate Burkhart, please summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th.
Make no mistake, when you vote this fall, you are hiring someone to do a job for you and represent you. Focus on the substance of the candidates' experiences. Be leery of the one-issue candidates. Be leery of candidates promising wholesale change. We have the opportunity to lay a foundation for the success of future generations in this community. Whether we want it or not, we're going to experience significant growth over the next 20 years. The question becomes how to plan for and manage that growth. Choose good leaders to manage this. Choose visionaries with collaborative qualities. Choose members of our community that not only have a long and intimate history with our city, but also have a history of making good decisions. I'm an independent candidate. I want to represent the greater good, the silent majority, our busy families, and not a special interest group. And this is not a matter of a single candidate. It's a vision of working together to ensure there's progress and our community moves forward in a planful, intentional manner. I want to continue our commitment to the 2040 strategic vision, understanding this document must be pliable and revisited often to meet our changing needs. As leaders, we need a strategic vision to succeed. As they say in business school, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Without a strategic plan, we have no framework from which to operate. I believe entrepreneurship is the most effective and efficient channel to create jobs and increase the wealth of our community. Therefore, our tax and other policies should encourage people to invest in themselves and their ideas to create new opportunities. I've always been a proponent of living below your means and believe government should operate in a similar manner. I'd like to thank my campaign manager, Josh Ondish, his mom, Margaret Gregor, and my steering committee for all of their assistance with my campaign. If you appreciate what I've said, I'd be pleased to get you a yard sign. Give me your address, and I'll give you some literature as well. My name is Kevin Burkhardt, and I'm running for Prior Lake City Council. I'm a proven leader, and I make great things happen. I want to earn your support and work for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keeney, please summarize your position and state why residents of Prior Lake should vote for you on Tuesday, November 8th.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget and taxes because I think it really illustrates why it's so important, why trust of your leadership is so important. I've sat up here and heard people say that we've raised taxes. And the reality is, yes, they went up in 2015 and 2016 pretty significantly. But what you're not hearing, and I don't know if it's because these people are naive or maybe they're intentionally leaving this out. Either way, that destroys a lot of trust in my mind. In 2012, we had a 7% reduction. 2013, 0 change. 2014, 0.4% change. If you factor in on a per household basis, 2010, the per household city taxes in Prior Lake were $1,200. The preliminary levy we passed last night, $1,250, a $50 increase over 7 years, 4.2% cumulative increase over 7 years. That's less than 0.6% per year. I don't know how you can get more fiscally restrained than that. So I don't know where these people are thinking taxes are going up. They're not. So to me, that's a trust issue. Meanwhile, the quality ratings of the service that the city has provided have remained very high. And I'm not going to take any credit for that. That goes on to the hardworking staff of the city of Prior Lake. They've buckled down and they've made things happen even though we've been slowly cutting their operating budgets. One of the big things I heard tonight was all about listening to people. About half the people in here I've seen come up and speak at this podium at our public forum. The previous council to me actually completely prohibited people from speaking at their public meetings. I was one of the advocates who said, no, we got to let people come in. If you go back and look, I'm one of the people who voted in the bylaws to allow the public forum, allow people to come and talk to us. Talk about experience. I'm obviously the most experienced candidate for city council up here. I'm not going to have to go through the learning curve again. I know how this stuff works. And I have a proven track record. You can go look at it. You don't have to just trust what I'm saying. You can look what I've done. Proven track record of being fiscally conservative. Proven track record of encouraging and welcoming input and respecting opposing views. Definitely a proven track record of advocating, protecting neighborhoods and homes from disruptive changes. Proven track record of working to find the best solution. Definitely not serving any special interests. I'm not here as the mouthpiece for either of the two big factions politically in town here. I doubt Wes or Jack really are telling me what to do. Nearly every candidate here tonight was saying what they're going to do. I've actually done those things. Please vote for me, re-elect Richard Keeney, November 8th for the Prior Lake City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And in closing, on behalf of myself, thank you to the City of Prior Lake, to Kristen and Dave, the candidates, the Prior Lake Chamber of Commerce, all the attendees and viewers. Just as a reminder, the candidate forum will be broadcast live on the local government access channel and then rebroadcast daily until the election. The city will also have the video available online on its website until the election. Don't forget to vote on Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you and have a nice evening.